Rene Descartes, French philosopher and Captain Hook lookalike. He's most famous for I think therefore I am, but in the same book as his famous cogito argument, you will also find his original attempt to prove the existence of God, and it is this argument that we are looking at today. For those of you following along with your copy of Descartes at home, you will find it in Meditation 3, and you may already know it as the Trademark argument. Descartes' mission in the Meditations was to doubt absolutely everything he could, the existence of his own body, of God, of the external world, everything. Anything that remained that he could not doubt after he'd done that, he thought would be certain knowledge. So for the moment, he isn't saying that he believes in an external physical world, which he calls formal reality. He's just examining what ideas of it he finds in his head, in representational reality. Now remember that distinction because it's going to be important. Descartes finds that he has ideas of three different sorts of things, each more real than the last. At the bottom of the scale, you've got modes, or accidents, we would call them properties, which depend for their existence on finite substance. And at the top of the scale, you've got the most real thing, the ens realissimum, infinite substance. So for example, brownness is a property, but it depends for its existence on the finite substance of the table. And if you don't have the table or some finite substance there, you're not just going to get brownness, the property, floating around, not even attached to anything. And infinite substance, the ens realissimum, is God. Eternal, everlasting, and omnipotent. Now remember, this isn't necessarily what formal reality is like, this is just representational reality. For now. Descartes also has this idea, which he says he cannot doubt, that a cause must have at least as much reality as its effect. So, finite substance can cause a property to exist, but the other way around doesn't work. Finite substance can cause finite substance to exist, but it can't cause infinite substance to exist. Why not? Well, Descartes thinks that if something has a property, the thing that caused it to exist must also have that property. Otherwise, we've got properties just springing into existence out of nowhere. So, for instance, if something is hot, it must be because it was heated by something else that is also hot. Or if the bridge is strong, it must be because the iron it is made of is strong, and so on. And this, he says, is true whether we're considering formal reality or representational reality. If he has an idea of finite substance, it must have been caused by something at least as real as finite substance. Descartes himself is finite substance, but he has this idea of infinite substance, God. According to what he's said so far, there's no way he could have thought of that idea on his own. So he concludes that God itself must therefore exist and have planted the idea of itself in Descartes' mind from birth like a creator signing its creation with a trademark. Otherwise, there's just no way he could have even thought of it. There are two key principles at play in this argument. The first is this idea that some things are more real than others, the levels of reality principle. And the second is this idea that causes must be at least as real as their effects, the causal adequacy principle. And unfortunately for Descartes, both of them are pretty much bollocks. Now, kudos to Descartes, he did actually circulate copies of the Meditations and ask people to critique it so that he could reply to their criticisms, which is as close to leaving the comments section on as he could possibly have done in those days. And in some editions of the book, you'll find the criticisms and his replies to them in the back. Unfortunately, that also means his ideas kind of got put through the mangle a little bit. First off, the causal adequacy principle, well, we know that's not true. Something doesn't need to have the same properties as the thing it causes to exist. Jim Cottingham, who's a modern-day Descartes commentator, gives the example of helium, which has quite different properties from the hydrogen that is fused to make it. Or a cake, which might have quite different properties from the ingredients that go into it. One of the contemporary examples that Descartes received was from mathematician and music theorist Marin Mersenne, who said that animals and plants are alive, but they are kept alive by the actions of the sun and the rain, which are not alive. Interestingly, Descartes tried to get around that counterexample by saying that animals aren't actually alive. They're just sort of organic robots, automatons with no feeling or sensation. A point that he sadly tried to prove by dissecting living dogs without anaesthetic. Secondly, the levels of reality principle, which received its most damning criticism from Thomas Hobbes himself in one of my favourite lines of philosophy that has stayed with me since I first read the Meditations as a kid. Does reality admit of more or less? Descartes says that finite substance is more real than properties, and infinite substance is more real than finite substance, but what does more real mean? Things don't exist more or less on a sliding scale. Either something exists or it doesn't. So, sadly for Descartes, his trademark argument is more or less consigned to the history of philosophy now. But he's still got the cogito going for him, that was still pretty important, and it just goes to show you can't win them all. But what do you guys think of Descartes' trademark argument? Do you buy it? Next time we could either do should we keep nuclear weapons, or we could do the ethics of suicide prevention. For more philosophical videos every Friday, please subscribe. Before we do the comments from before Christmas, some quick items of housekeeping. First of all, yes, the background has changed. It will be back to normal in the next episode. Second of all, the last episode went viral on the front page of Reddit, which was pretty terrifying, so welcome to all you new subscribers who came in off the back of that. I will be hanging out in our philosophy sometimes. Philosophy Tube is me, if you want to come and say hi. Thirdly, I haven't seen the footage yet, but hopefully you can tell this episode was filmed on a brand new camera, which was paid for by you guys, by all the people who sponsor the show on Patreon, so thank you to all of you for your generosity. That is so kind of you. I'm going to continue taking the money that you pledge to the show and putting it back in to make the show better on technical stuff and research materials and food for me as well. This episode was sponsored by Scott Eichler, DJ, Looking Glass Universe, Rich Clarke, and a bunch of other people whose names are in the description. Thank you, all of you, so much. I mean, I could stand here and gush about how amazing the fans of the show are for ages, but thank you all, thank you. So last time we were talking about the Frege-Geach problem, one of the biggest problems in ethics, so let's see what you guys had to say. Adam Myers asked, where did non-cognitivism, the view we were discussing, actually come from? Well, it was largely a reaction to the problems of the competing theories. Non-cognitivism does answer a lot of the questions that are supposedly a problem for cognitivist ethics. For instance, what makes moral statements true or false, or even why should we care about moral statements? Non-cognitivism does actually avoid a lot of those questions. Unfortunately, as we saw, it also throws out the baby with the bathwater. Lots of people asked, why don't the non-cognitivists just accept the Frege-Geach problem and say, yeah, okay, you can't make logical statements out of morality? Well, unfortunately, that means that you can't explain what certain sentences mean, like the ones we were talking about last time. And a bigger part of the problem is you then have to throw out loads of our ordinary language and say that it's meaningless. For instance, the meaning of Ollie thinks that stealing is bad seems to follow from the meaning of me saying stealing is bad. But non-cognitivism can't explain that, so you've got to chuck all of that out. All embedded moral language just goes out the window. And as far as I know, nobody has bitten the bullet on non-cognitivism because it is just totally destroyed by the Frege-Geach problem. You've got to throw out so much of what we do. Max Schneider and a few other people said, in the arguments we were discussing, why don't we replace stealing, boo, with I disapprove of stealing? Wouldn't that fix the problem? Well, yes, it would fix the problem, but unfortunately, I disapprove of stealing is a sentence that can be true or false, and the non-cognitivists said that ethical statements can't be true or false. So it does solve the problem, but actually only by surrendering and giving up non-cognitivism. Jeffrey Anderson and Not the Real Base Kitten said, surely morality is just a matter of personal opinion anyway. Well, yes, you could think that, but unfortunately, being a moral relativist like that won't help the non-cognitivist here, because you can still make logical arguments out of your personal opinions. For instance, if I have a personal opinion that bacon and peanut butter are good, I must have a personal opinion that peanut butter is good. So, being a moral relativist won't actually help the non-cognitivist here. That's all the time we've got this week. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!